Hello, everyone. On this week's Market Tidbits, I'm here with Grace Yu, one of the project managers at Daxue Consulting, and we're here to talk about my recent research in nostalgia marketing in China.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace. I'm currently the project manager in Daxue and also a native Chinese. Nostalgia marketing is actually quite a trendy concept in Chinese marketing field, especially regarding consumer goods. Actually, myself as a native Chinese, I found this report super interesting. It brings back lots of my own memories. So yes, I'd like to hear more about the nostalgia marketing. So Alison, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I'm super glad that you feel nostalgic when you look at the report because that is what I had in mind. I thought when this report goes out, it has to make every Chinese person feel nostalgic. But anyway, let's talk about how nostalgia marketing works. So nostalgia marketing is marketing through appealing to a specific idealized emotion from your past, usually between the ages of 12 to 22. So why is it between the ages of 12 to 22? Well, actually, during those years, we experience an increased amount of feel-good chemicals, which are dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. So that makes those memories related to feeling happy. And so nostalgia marketing triggers those happy, idealized memories through certain triggers, and those triggers can be like music, it can be flavors, or it can even be IP. And so some of these triggers, for example, smell is a big trigger because the olfactory bulb is really close to the part of the brain that processes emotion, the limbic system, which processes emotions. But also an interesting one is also sadness is a trigger of nostalgia. And so that is one interesting takeaway that we found in our research, because we found that one reason why nostalgia marketing actually works pretty well in China is because there's also like a loneliness epidemic going on, especially among Chinese millennials, white collar workers in large cities. So yeah, we have seen
Yeah.
a lot of nostalgia marketing campaigns in China targeting Chinese Gen Z and millennials. Grace, what do you think is the reason for nostalgia marketing being so successful among this age group?
I never hear nostalgia marketing in such academic context. But yes, indeed, in China, younger generation is more of a target than Generation X. Not only because they have stronger consumption power, but more importantly, because nostalgic marketing does work remarkably with them. So you see, in China has experienced massive changes in the past decades. For most people in Generation Y and they move to higher tier cities. They live in a lifestyle totally different from their parents and their hometowns. And they're experiencing increasingly intensified pressures from competition. Well, of course, these changes bring opportunities and higher quality of life, but we have to admit that deep inside it also brings insecurities and anxieties when everything around is changing so fast. Under such context, nostalgia scenes light up of underlying attachment to the sense of stability and security, especially after pandemic. Pandemic has enhanced such attachments remarkably in this year, and that's also why we think nostalgia marketing is getting more and more popular since 2020.
Cool. So, Grace, how do you do nostalgia marketing in a modern context?
Yeah, that actually is a quite interesting topic, given that when we talk about nostalgic marketing, people intuitively think that we're going back to the old times. But actually, it's super important for us to do it in the modern context to combine the historical moments or old forms with modern elements. For example, the case that Giordano has used in the nostalgic marketing, they have leveraged the characters of old English textbooks to bring back the collective memory. But the way they use that, they print this character in their t-shirts, but not in the original image, but in the image with more comic style. So it's more like a style that illustrates in the style more of comic and illustration. So it suits more to younger generation's taste. It can bring the brands to brand rejuvenation rather than just simply going back to the cliche stuffs.
Great. Should we talk about how we did the nostalgia research?
Yes, definitely. I found the report itself super interesting, and the insights here regarding I think you leveraged the methodology of focus group, right? Do you want to
Actually,
talk more about how you did the research?
yeah, so actually we leveraged in-depth interviews and then we supplemented our in-depth interviews with social media listening. So for our in-depth interviews, we interviewed 13 Chinese millennials and Gen Z from all over China. We interviewed them in person for at least an hour, and we recorded the interview, and then we analyzed the transcripts in both Chinese and English to find commonalities and to find trends to see what are the variations between the regions, between the genders. So we uncovered a lot of information, which I'm super excited to share with you.
Yes, are there any trends or insights or cases you want to highlight?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I want to highlight. The first section we found more about the specific senses. So like the specific triggers regarding like smells, sounds in different scenarios. So at home, at school, and we found case studies that correlate with these triggers. And these case studies have gotten feedback on social media saying, oh, this makes me feel nostalgic, makes me miss home, makes me miss the good old days. And then in the second part of the research, we uncovered what IP is nostalgic for Chinese. And that is because co-branding is super important in nostalgia marketing. And it's an especially powerful tool for foreign brands who don't necessarily have the nostalgia power in China because they maybe weren't in China back during the good old days. So they can partner with a Chinese brand who was, but maybe isn't so popular right now, when they can both have like a second wave together.
Exactly. Like collaboration between domestic Chinese brand and foreign brand newly enter China market could also be what we have been saying about doing nostalgic marketing in modern context. Actually, I want to hear more about the home pass because it kind of attracts me in the first glance, especially in the home pass when we talk about smell, what brings you back to home. You mentioned homemade rice. So it's like something never came to me before, but we put this on. Oh yes, that's so spot on. And now I remember how it smells in my home and how my mom called me home and for the sort of stuff. So yes, please talk more about it.
Yeah, so we found when our Chinese participants felt nostalgic about home, it was really focused on food, which is not overly surprising because food is super important in Chinese culture. But some of the things that came up was homemade rice, fried pork, braised beef, soup, and osmanthus. Which osmanthus is a really interesting one because it's not really popular in the West, but osmanthus is something that like a lot of different brands use to localize in China. For example, Pepsi recently came out with an osmanthus flavor.
This is very interesting concept in China because actually it's not a general term for all Chinese. It's more like a term and concept in east of China, like in Shanghai or in Zhejiang or in Jiangsu. It's more local there. But the thing is, Chinese literature has extensively covered osmanthus. Maybe from the writers whose hometown is from east of China. But now it's more becoming a general term all over the country through literature, through marketing, through people talking about it. So yeah, it's a very good insights actually. Actually, it's not only in Pepsi, it's also in all kinds of foods. You put some osmanthus in and your food starts to get a little bit premium. So we Chinese are very consistent.
Yeah, and in our research, we found a case study for osmanthus perfume. So that was really interesting too. And the comments around that on social media said like, "Oh, it reminds me of my
Mhm.
childhood. I'll never forget this." And yeah, so earlier
Yeah, I
you
have one
mentioned
myself.
you do. Earlier you mentioned that
Yes.
like osmanthus is related to the eastern region, and in our research we did find that each region does kind of have their couple of scents and smells.
Mhm.
Grace, what region
Yeah.
are you from?
Technically, I'm from North China.
North China.
We
Okay.
imagine Chinese, yes, you imagine Chinese map as a chicken. It just looks
Yes.
like one, and from the neck of the chicken.
I
It's
think,
from Beijing.
oh,
It's
you're
in
from
the neck
Beijing.
of
Okay.
China. Mhm.
So
Yeah.
for you, perhaps what makes you feel nostalgic is grilled meat, firecrackers, and cedar after snow. That's what our research found.
Yeah, you do know us.
Yeah. For the eastern region, it was osmanthus, of course, and then fresh cut grass and chicken soup. For southwest region, perhaps the least surprising is hot pot, chili peppers, and sweet and sour soup. And for the south region, the nostalgic triggers were mangoes, bananas, pool water, and fresh juice.
Now you make me hungry.
Also, we found some nostalgia triggers for school days, and we
Mhm.
found that um, some memories also revolve around food, specifically memories about the food shops that are located right outside of schools, which is something that
Yes.
doesn't really exist in the West, to my experience, or not in the U.S.
Oh,
at
really? It
least.
doesn't?
Yeah, we eat the food in the school, but we don't have like shops located right outside schools because
That's mainly because we have a free life. You can go outside ski and buy everything, but what we have is within the ski.
yeah, we like have to drive, so yeah, anyway, so
Yes.
some nostalgic memories was like fried meat, mini hot
Mm.
dogs in the dorms, and then some beautiful scenery that some of our participants described was ivy growing on school walls. School
Ooh.
uniforms, yeah, and the ivy growing on
Mm.
school walls, that actually reminds me of the Jay Chow movie The Secret. Because there's,
Mm.
I don't know if you've seen it, but there's
Yes,
ivy growing.
it
It's
is.
a beautiful movie. Everyone, you guys should watch it, listeners. It's a really good movie, and I'm sure it makes a lot of Chinese people feel nostalgic. Um, but
Yeah, definitely.
one really interesting thing about nostalgia for school days is that a lot of Chinese said that they feel nostalgic for their school uniforms, and there's even a trend of school uniform photo shoots that people sign up for, and they
Yeah.
put on uniform costumes and they just pretend like they're in high school, and a photographer takes pictures for them, which is really interesting because we do not I yeah, I wouldn't expect something like this. Grace, what's your take on this?
Oh. Oh gosh, school uniform. You won't believe this, but I have four exactly same school uniforms back in when I was in high school, just so that I can change. It's kind of mandatory for most of Chinese high school to wear school uniform so that you won't waste your study time on choosing which outfit you have for the day. So yeah, school uniform is kind of like a mandatory part of your teenager life. Also, I think for school uniform, but the point is, Chinese school uniform is not that good looking. Unlike in Japanese, people are wearing this, especially for girls, super cute school uniform skirts. But in China, it's just like sexless uniform that you have to wear kind of to obey the school rules. So yes, but the thing is, when you wear back your school uniform, that reminds you of how simple life used to be. And I guess that's why lots of Chinese people, although they hate school uniforms when they were teenagers, but when they grow up, they try to rewear it to recall this part of their memories. But life is easy, you just need to study, and there's nothing else you need to worry about the world.
That's really interesting insight.
Mm.
Because yeah, school uniforms, you would think that there's something that's boring, but oftentimes it's in the boring things, in the mundane things, that's where nostalgia is found. And so this is a
Yeah,
really big hint
exactly.
for brands trying to use nostalgia marketing in China, it's not always the big, exciting, the flashy things that create nostalgia.
Yes.
Oftentimes it's just the boring, mundane, daily things like school uniforms that can be incredibly nostalgic for people. Another thing that really surprised me was the amount of nostalgia surrounding exams. And I know that in China, exams are pretty serious. They're not something to take lightly, especially the Gaokao, which is unlike anything in the West. So I definitely cannot relate to this. But we had a lot of really interesting comments about the Gaokao, especially that some nostalgia triggers for the Gaokao are mosquito spray, which was surprising me because Gaokao is indoors. There shouldn't be mosquitoes, but mosquito spray, I guess it's maybe the time of the season. The smell of rain also, and the smell of books. Yeah, and then I think people also mention that they feel very tired but very motivated, and then also how peaceful it felt after the test.
Yes, it's like all your teenage life, high school, 3-year junior, 3-year senior is all set up for one day, or 2 days actually. And then it's interesting, Chinese Gaokao, as you mentioned about the season, it's in June 7th and June 8th. 6、7、8. We have this saying that is pronounced similarly to 录取吧. It's like take me in. So yes, it happens in summer, and that's why mosquito spray is a very interesting insight. It doesn't come to me at the first place, but when you see that, I do remember how it smells through all the summers, and we usually spend like before Gaokao, 1 year before Gaokao, for every single day we spend more than 14 or 16 hours in our classroom just to study. And we have very limited time to sleep. Yes. Also, you don't really get much opportunity to get out of the classroom. You just stay there and study for 1 year, or in extreme case, 3 whole years of your senior high school. So yeah, it could be crazy.
And I can see how in a situation that intense can create for some powerful and vivid memories, which would create the nostalgia effect. In fact, it seems that Chinese are so nostalgic for the Gaokao that there are these paid study rooms that imitate the Gaokao environment, and it's for perhaps adults or even maybe even college students who need to return to the intense studying time. They'll rent these study rooms, and the comments on social media about these study rooms is that it brings them back to the high school time, the Gaokao time, and therefore they are more efficient at studying, which is
true. Actually, me myself, I came to this paid study room occasionally as well, but it's mainly for that. Try to simulate the environments in your high school where everyone is super dedicated, super focused on the study, and no mobile phones, no other kind of entertaining stuff. So it's kind of help you to concentrate and enhance your efficiency. So it does work, even without the nostalgic part. But yeah, it does bring back lots of memories. We never studied that hard right after our high schools.
That's really interesting. And one other thing we found was that, as you know, Chinese high school students are not allowed to date. However, that does not stop them from having nostalgia around their first crushes.
Yes, tell me about it.
So some of the nostalgic feelings that Chinese had about their first crushes was that their heart was beating fast when they're walking together, hiding their crushes from their parents and teachers. Girls said that their crushes were warm, clean, and bright, and boys said that their crushes were gentle and sweet. Some smells that came up was the smell of hamburgers, the smell of fresh cut grass, and the smell of sweet fruit. And the smell of sweet fruit leads us to our case study, which is where there's perfume brands in China that will sell themselves as first love smell, 初恋, and there'll be like a fruity smell, just like what the boys said their first crush smelled like in our research.
Yes, it brings back lots of memories when I see the smell of fresh grass. So, you see, I also have a kind of relationship in my senior high school. Um, we have this so-called dates in only PE class, and because in PE class we have this time where people can like do the activity freely. Of course, we can't spend time together because it will be spotted by the teachers. So what we do is he runs around the track quickly, and I walk slowly on the track, so that when he ran past me, he slows down a bit. So we can have like 1 minute or even last 30 seconds to talk a bit until he runs back. So it's like he's faster than me, so we can get this very few minutes or seconds to talk.
That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard. If there's any
Uh,
movie makers trying to appeal to a Chinese audience, I think you have your answer right there.
it
Cool
will be
track.
only understood by 10 students. Yes, good track.
The more briefs, the more romantic. And I think the fact that dating was so taboo, I suppose that probably contributed to the um, nostalgia around it.
Yeah, all the rebellions.
Right. So let's talk about some of the nostalgic IP that we found, because for anybody who's trying to do a co-branding nostalgia marketing campaign, this stuff is really juicy.
So, is there any specific IP you want to bring up?
For cartoons, we were actually surprised by the diversity of which the nations that the cartoons were from. I I kind of expected to see one American and one Japanese, but we also saw a French cartoon in there as well, which is Martin Morning, and I hadn't heard of it until I did this research. Um, yeah, of course, there's a lot of nostalgic Chinese cartoons like Big Ear Tutu and Big Head Son, Small Head Dad, but it
Mm-hmm.
seems that a lot of Chinese feel really nostalgic also around anime.
Yes.
Specifically, Detective Conan was one that came up a lot, and I think that it made a lot of young Chinese, when they're watching it when they're kids, it made them feel scared actually.
But Conan is still my favorite.
And then moving on to movies, some of the top mentions were, of course, Police Story and Journey to the West, which are both Chinese. But then also from Japan was Spirited Away, which is also not surprising because it was one of the top movies globally. And the Harry
Mhm.
Potter franchise and the Transformers franchise. And what's really interesting about this is Universal Studios is opening a theme park in Beijing, and there's both a Harry Potter park and a Transformers park, and it's going to be the first Transformers park in the world, and it's
Oh,
opening
really?
in
I
China.
didn't know that.
Yeah, and I think it's
Wow.
a smart move because what we found is nearly every male that we interviewed brought up Transformers. It made a really big impact.
Mm.
And also the vitamin brand BiHealth, when it was trying to target male vitamin consumers, it it co-branded with Transformers as well. So Transformers is pretty big for co-branding in China.
Oh yeah, but actually that's a quite smart move, especially for boys. Oh gosh, Transformer is all I've heard in my childhood from them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really popular, and it's really interesting how some movies like Transformers are very popular in China, but then some movies like Star Wars, which are really big in the West, are really not that popular in China.
Yeah, actually, I'm quite curious about Star Wars as well. I never heard of it until like in my high school, and I started to watch foreign movies or foreign sitcoms, and everyone's talking about the Star Wars. I guess it's just different time differences. Like back to the 80s, Star Wars didn't really get the opportunity to explode in China, and it missed its shots.
Yes, I think that's exactly it. I think
Mm,
Star Wars was
mm.
too early for China,
Yeah,
but Transformers hit the sweet spot of like
yeah, it's all
having,
about timing.
yeah, the cartoon, or I believe it had a cartoon probably in the 90s or early 2000s, and then
Yes.
it came out with
Mhm.
a bunch of movies. Yeah, and Star Wars was out, I think, like in the 70s or 80s. and then kept going. But if you miss the beginning, it's not really worth picking it up in the middle.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Some of our participants' favorite artists that make them feel the most nostalgic was, of course, Jay Chou, SHE, JJ Lin, Angelina Chang, and then we started to get more foreign. So at the beginning, it's mostly like Chinese speaking artists, and then we got one Korean, Super Junior, and then Lady Gaga was also one of the top ones. Other artists that came up was Adele, and of course Avril Lavigne.
Yes, of course.
Yes, and Linkin Park as well. Some of the top video games was QQ Pets, Tetris, dressing games. I'm not familiar with these, but most of them are from 4399, and then also some 10-cent games. And also Grand Theft Auto was one of them, as well as Crossfire.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I just can't stop smiling when you mention these names. It's like all my memories coming back.
Right.
I have wasted tons of my time on this.
Yeah, and some of these brands they're good for co-branding. Like I know Super Mario is a big one, and I know
Yes.
Uniqlo has co-branded with them.
Mhm.
Also, I believe it was in the male beauty market. I remember now. It's L'Oreal Men sponsored a Crossfire esports tournament. So it's a really good way to tap into like a certain tribe. And I know for L'Oreal,
Yeah.
their thoughts were that they're trying to target men to use beauty products, but it's not as many men as women use these beauty products, and so they have to find them within their own tribe. And esports was the route they decided to go, and so they sponsored some esports events specifically for Crossfire, which is really nostalgic for a lot of Chinese.
Yes, I didn't know this context, but it is considered as a very smart move because Crossfire is in a way very popular and also is considered as a very masculine game. So yeah, it's a very smart co-branding, I agree. Also, Super Mario, as you mentioned, it's indeed a very hot IP, and they are very good at epic collaborating, epic collaboration, especially regarding the nostalgic marketing. Yes, it's super trendy in China in recent years. Me myself, I remember seeing it tons of times, in recent 2 years.
Yeah, and Super Mario is always updating. It's never going to go out of date because it's always updating and coming out with new games.
Yes, in Switch.
Yeah. So moving on to snacks, here's a big one: White Rabbit. At Daxue Consulting, we've kind of informally coined it, the queen of co-branding, because it has co-branded with so many different brands to use its flavor, its image, and it has made it's co-branded with Scent Diary to make like White Rabbit candy flavored perfume, and it's also made White Rabbit bubble tea and things like t-shirts. So yeah, in addition to White Rabbit, there's also Ovaltine, which is still sometimes sold like at milk tea shops today. I've seen that they sell like Ovaltine products, My Likes, which are kind of like Whoppers, Xiaomantou, La Tiao, green tongue ice cream, and calcium milk are some of the most nostalgic snacks for Chinese.
Interesting, because White Rabbit candy is also considered as one of the most successful case of brand revitalization. Domestic Chinese brand who has really got relates to younger generation and regained their popularities in in millennials and Generation Z. Yes, White Rabbit candy can be a very interesting case to study on.
Right. If you want to study successful co-branding in China, definitely look to White Rabbit. It's definitely made a name for itself, and it was like I mentioned, it's a candy that was very popular in the 90s, early 2000s, And then as the consumer base gets older, they don't necessarily want to eat candy every day, but they do like perfume, they do like bubble tea, they do like all these other products. And White Rabbit has definitely capitalized on nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Also, I see that in the case study, you have put in some of the restaurants we are most familiar with, like 过去进行时. Do you want to talk a bit more on it?
Yeah, sure. So, this restaurant is in Shanghai, is called the Continuous Past. It is literally a portal to the past. You walk in the door and you're transported to 1999 China. And the menu is made like a exam. So in order to order your food, you have to complete an exam, which is really stressful for people who don't know Chinese. Um, and then the food comes in like a little metal lunch box, and every day there's a different special. And then on top of this, you can get like a private little dorm room where there's one decorated as a boys' room with like basketball jerseys hanging, and then there's one decorated as like a girl room with like images of idols. And we have pictures of this restaurant on our website for our nostalgic case studies. But Grace, tell me about, I know when you started working at Daxue Consulting, you were peer pressured into going through that time portal. I want to know about your experience and how you felt at that restaurant.
Yeah, I mean, when I firstly saw the name of this report, Nostalgia Marketing, I knew you will put this case study in. This is a restaurant super near to our office. It's also the restaurant basically everyone in Daxue team has took me to when I first joined the team. Actually, I do feel like this restaurant brings back lots of memories. It's very well decorated, and every single details has like every single details is for senior high school, and we have the blackboard which we update the content every week with our trucks, and also we have the dormitory upside down two beds, and for like the exam papers mentioned by you earlier, like the exam paper you mentioned earlier, yes, we do this kind of context, and even the paper itself, the texture is mostly like what we use in our high school. So yes, I feel like I'm coming back to my nightmares. It's high school again. Now I need to do now I need to do the text, the exam, everything all over again. But yeah, overall speaking, it does feel like I'm young again and coming back to my 16 or 17. Also, the music debutante is back to that age, so everything is just so familiar and in a way make you feel secure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting experience. And I think that this idea of having like a totally immersive nostalgia experience is something that they can also be done in escape rooms or also in any sort of like eating location or any store really. And I think that's something that's super interesting and super cool and definitely worth studying.
Yes. Oh, yes. Escape room indeed. We do have these themes of escape room. One of the very popular theme is high school.
Speaking of Chinese high school, there's also another case study which I really like. There's this English textbook with the characters Li Lei and Han Mei Mei. And this textbook was published between the years 1990 and 2000 and was in the English curriculum for 100 million Chinese, most of which are in the millennial age group now. And so this textbook was picked up by somebody in the McDonald's marketing department. And they decided, let's use these characters from this textbook to make a McDonald's ad where the characters have to order McDonald's in English. It's really adorable, and it even makes me feel nostalgic. And I think this is one of my favorite nostalgia marketing campaigns. And it's also really clever to think of IP other than brands. Look at
Yes.
textbooks, look at what daily, like we mentioned earlier, what mundane things did people come in contact with between the ages of 12 to 22? Because these things have more nostalgic value than you might be aware of, even if they're not flashy or special.
Definitely. By the way, I've heard that instead of Lily and Hanime, you have your own learning character when you were studying Chinese, right?
Yes, for foreigners who study Chinese, we have our own integrated Chinese characters of Wang Peng, and I might butcher the other names, but I think it's like Li Bai or something like that. Oh, Gao Wenzhong. And Wang Peng is like a stud, and he's like the Chinese guy, of course, and he plays basketball. And then Levi is like a cute Korean girl who everyone flirts with. And then Gao Wenjong is, I think he's supposed to be British, but he's kind of like a loser, like he's a downer. So yeah, that's how I can relate to this McDonald's campaign is I think if I saw an ad with those characters, I would remember that forever. I would probably save it and share it with everyone I know because that's just so cute.
I think those like American fast food brands, they make pretty good nostalgic marketing. Like one that KFC made for like bring the price back to blah 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 years, like bring the price back to old times. I knew that is supposed to be a global event and it happens in different markets, but I do like the part that when they bring this events to China market, they set up the year to the year they entered China market. So like they do this localization. And also they try to create the moments like how KFC has spent Chinese like has accompanied Chinese people to go through all these decades. Oh, it's super interesting. I do like the events. I brought a lot of the product out there back to time price.
Yeah, that's really clever. And I know KFC is one of the most successful fast food brands in China, even more successful than McDonald's. And so
Yes.
yeah, and that's a really cool marketing campaign. So I believe the year was 1987, but they dropped their
Yes.
prices. Yeah, so KFC dropped their prices to the same prices that they were in 1987, which was the first year that KFC entered China. And so it's really a good deal for anybody who wants to participate. It also gains the brand a lot of visibility and definitely leverages nostalgia, and everybody will reminisce about their first time going to KFC.
Yes, most importantly, is it also creates this what we call social currency. By social currency, we mean that you don't need to express yourself, you just need to share the campaign or participate the campaign. Your move itself is a expression. So these kind of campaigns are easily to create social buzz. People will share with others and maybe take photos on social medias, this sort of stuff. So yes, this sort of campaign could be very successful.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Social currency is
Mhm.
definitely important in a lot of Chinese marketing campaigns. And I know that
Yes,
one other point for nostalgia marketing in China is that a lot of these memories that they're tapping into are known as collective memories. And so memories regarding
yes,
school, memories regarding the family, it's not necessarily what it means to the individual, but it's what it means to the individual and their group of friends. How can they share this? How can they talk about it? And so it's less about
yes.
capturing like an intimate experience for an individual
Mhm,
and more about capturing
mhm.
something that they can share and talk about and they share among their peers.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what brands should know before starting their nostalgia campaign in China. First is to appeal to the senses. So find a way to adapt your product to trigger certain smells, sounds, or sights that really resonate with Chinese. And second is to aim for when the audience was 12 to 22 years old. This is again when dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin were at their all time high. And so memories made during these times are particularly vivid and they're particularly idealized. And so that's the age group you want to aim for. And then you can think backward to think when was my target audience 12 to 22? So was their childhood like? And then after that, our next tip is to look to co-branding. Not all brands were in China during time range of 12 to 22, and so they might have to partner with somebody who was, such as White Rabbit or perhaps Mario, and this is a way that both brands can leverage each other to have mutual benefits. And co branding in itself has been shown to be highly effective in China. So thank you everybody for tuning in and learning about nostalgia, and a big thanks to Grace for being on the show with me and sharing some of her own nostalgic memories and sharing some of her own expertise as well.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing back all this memory to me.
Yes, I hope you
It's good to think about it. Yes.
hope
I
you
do enjoy this
enjoy
for sure.
your nostalgic swimming in your nostalgic memories. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and hope you enjoyed the show. Happy New Year! 新年快乐!
新年快乐!